So for today's final section of the lecture, I just want to do a quick recap on mobile media and then to also move that into this concept of augmented reality and building on the presumption that you have followed the case study above and you have installed Layer on your phones. You've been exploring augmented reality and understanding the shifting nature between place and space in terms of how we interpret the geography that we're physically located within, or the in situ. So to begin, I just want to start with what I think is a really great definition of mobile media from a paper that I wrote with three other colleagues, Jared Goggin, Tim Dwyer and Fiona Martin. And we define this term as a complex assembly of emergent hybrid media forms from smartphones, tablets, and the apps phenomenon through new televisual ecologies and locative media to pervasive computers and smart cities, which tends to then indicate that mobile media is far more than just looking at something within a screen. It's looking at these concepts of digital urban environments, digital cities, urban environments. Excuse me. And now thinking about mobile media beyond just the mobile phone or the smartphone, and putting this in context of a larger geography or a larger space, and building on what we were talking about last week in terms of cultural production, how there's cultural production, there's the high and the low culture, which is part of that. Cultural institutions have been predominantly facilitating this production. With the introduction of social media, this arrangement comes under question as users then start to define what the culture is and really blur those lines between high and low culture. We had some fantastic and engaging discussions around these concepts in the seminars and tutorials of last week. So what the next phase that we started to talk about was cultural intermediation, and these actors that are in the middle to facilitate cultural production and as taste agents, essentially between the high and low, the cultural production of low and high culture. So then this extends into the concept of mobile media and augmented reality, and you can see that cultural institutions are attempting to engage their users increasingly, and augmented reality is one of those great applications that enable users and institutions to connect around the collections. There's a lot of literature which describes how collections should be made public. Users should have access to them. They should be able to engage with them in new and exciting and innovative ways. And so there's that aspect, and then I think there's also this aspect of mobile media and how that impacts a user's understanding or engagement with that type of sometimes archival released media content in some sort of way. There's a great quote from Cocchiolo and Rabina which question this in terms of archived collections, mobile media, and the effect on location. And they ask questions such as, was this locale always like this, and what has happened here? And so this is a window into trying to understand how cultural institutions are using archival collections to tell different stories about place. And augmented reality is the technology which is enabling this type of window to enable this sort of thing. I'd just refer to Jason Farman, who's done quite a lot of work in this mobile media space, particularly around cultural artifacts. And he's got this great quote in terms of mobile media and mapping that media. And he says, and I quote, it's mapping media, or the significance of mapping media as a means of representing and practicing space as a key example in the exploration of what space means to our embodied practices of mobile technologies. So how we're engaging with our mobile technologies in places. And this starts to bring this discussion around, as we started to touch on it in the Twitter seminar last night, around the significance of place and space. Hinton and Horth go into explain a little bit around this, but we might think about it as space is the area, the geography, whereas the place is the lived-in experience within that space. And so, for example, coming back to the cultural institution aspects and using augmented reality, as a lot of cultural institutions begin to release their archival collections and engage in augmented reality, they might be able to release an archive collection of your local town hall, which you go to that place, or you go to that space, and you look at that beautiful building, whatever it might be, from whatever year. And then you bring your mobile phone over and across and activate some archival footage out of a cultural institution's collection, and suddenly you're back in the early 1900s, looking at how this place was years before you were ever there, and suddenly your concept of this place is challenged or shifted or changed. And I think it's interesting to understand, building on some of the concepts that we've been talking about, how mobile media is not only engaging or shifting our concept, our social relationship with each other, but also this social relationship with our geography. And there's it's sort of, I think a really nice way to describe that is this is a mobile media space. So I'll use a Farman quote again to really bring this home. Farman notes on augmented reality technologies that are coupled with cultural institutions demonstrate the ways that mobile technologies are able to imbue space with meaning. So suddenly these geographies take on a whole new meaning, and that's how we're engaging with them. I'm going to wrap up this week's lecture at that point. What I would like you to do is to continue playing with LayAR, L-A-Y-A-R, as a form of augmented reality. If you do have time, and I know this will be quite difficult given that assessment's due this week, it'd be a fantastic experiment to get out into a cultural institution and explore how these augmented reality technologies are in fact manifesting this concept of space and place, and how we're engaging with mobile media in that regard. So that's one thing, or even just using that, building on what we've been describing with Ingress in the past week, how augmented reality then takes that to another level, or what's the shift or the differences between that. So at this point, I'll leave you with this. Please continue playing with LayAR, and I'll see you in class next week.